Hey YouTube, Untamed here. So yesterday, January 22nd, 2024, Vroom, the online car buying and selling service, has officially called it quits. So they announced yesterday saying that they will no longer be selling or buying vehicles from anybody. So they're shutting their virtual doors, if you will. And this right here is a clear indicator of the direction that the used vehicle market is going. We've talked about it here on my channel, but this right here is a huge example of that, right? So you have, companies like Vroom, companies like Carvana, and Carmax kinda, although Carmax isn't a total online gig like Vroom and Carvana, but for Vroom to shut their virtual doors is sending a strong signal right now. So during the pandemic, during COVID, companies like Vroom were able to excel and thrive, right? Because there was super low inventory across the board. We had average lot times of inventory from 3 to 7 days. We talked about that. Now we're looking at 70 to 80 days average lot time for all vehicles across the board, to include used vehicles across various manufacturers. That does not bode well with a business model like Vroom and Carvana. Right? There's so much inventory that's already out there. We got new inventory stacking up on dealership lots. Dealers aren't even able to incentivize new vehicle sales. They're slashing prices left and right. Yesterday, I posted on my Instagram a brand new Jeep Wrangler 4xe listed at $17,000 or $16,000 off of MSRP. So a huge cut, and I would argue that we're likely going to see even larger cuts as we teeter into 2024. Because right now we're seeing record high repossession rates, record high loan defaults, and record high wholesale numbers. All dealerships across the board, especially Carmax in particular, they're pushing record high numbers of vehicles through auction. They're just doing whatever they can to move their inventory, to salvage the amount of revenue and money that they have tied up in their inventory and their vehicles. Carmax in particular has $3.6 billion worth of inventory across the US. So consequently, they need to push that inventory out the door as fast as possible, even if they're taking a bit of a loss, because even they know the writing is on the wall, and the further we get into 2024, the worse off they will be, unfortunately, right? The writing is totally on the wall. So they're moving their inventory at a loss, but hoping for less of a loss as, had they had kept the inventory, right? So we're seeing that with Carmax. Carvana, they're holding on. Their stock is failing too. Carmax, their stock is failing. I'll throw their details up here on the screen for you to look at. But Vroom, they were the first to fold. They folded yesterday, and I'm not happy to see that, right? I mean, we never want to see an organization or companies fail quite like that. And personally, I've actually always kind of appreciated Vroom. Selfishly, if I'm being honest with you guys, because I've gone through a number of vehicles here on the channel. Whenever I sell a vehicle or whenever I'm trying to maximize the value for my vehicles myself, I'll start with Vroom. I always started with Vroom. And what you do is you go on their website, you would plug in your VIN number, the condition of the vehicle, you put all those descriptions in there, and then boom, within 24 hours, they would shoot you a no kidding offer to purchase your vehicle. And it was always pretty competitive, especially during the pandemic. When inventory was low across the board, they were competitive with their offers, and they would give solid offers. I would then take that and then go to my local dealerships and say, hey, here's my offer from Vroom. Are you willing to beat it if you wanted to buy my vehicle, right? So if I was selling my 4Runner or my Tundra TRD Pro, I would start with Vroom and make that my benchmark or my baseline as I began my negotiations with dealerships. So I've always selfishly appreciated Vroom for that in the past. But about 10 months ago, maybe a year ago, we saw a huge shift take place, right? We saw Vroom offering way less, right? There was almost overnight. It almost felt like an overnight, black and white shift. Like they were offering great numbers and then boom, it's almost as if they saw the writing on the wall coming in the following year where they started offering terrible purchase offers. So that was kind of the beginning of their demise, in my opinion, about 10 months ago, I would argue. And I find this kind of interesting. Vroom was the first to close their virtual doors yesterday. I do foresee Carvana following suit. I don't hope for it, but I think they will. And eventually even Carmax potentially. Looking at their stock right now, looking at all their very drastic measures that they're taking right now, they're pulling out all stops to try to salvage the company across the board. So I do think, unless they do something huge within the next 12 months, even Carmax may crumble. But they have a larger footprint, and of course, they're not just strictly online. So for me, I think as we see companies like Amazon enter the scene, kind of a strange timing, but I think that might even be the kind of the final nail in the coffin, if you will, for companies like Carvana and Carmax, because Amazon is going to be offering brand new vehicles. They're going to be selling brand new Hyundais off of a couple clicks away on Amazon. You can buy a Hyundai. And I think that business model makes sense, right? I mean, you can buy a brand new vehicle with good peace of mind, but buying a used vehicle, although you had money back guarantees and you can trade it, return it and all that stuff, it's just it never offered you full peace of mind, in my opinion, especially on their end, the business end, right? So many people can lie. They can go online and they can plug in a VIN number for their vehicle and say excellent condition and all that. And obviously when they show up, it has to live up to it in order for them to get the full offer amount that Vroom offered them. But there could always be other gremlins involved, right? So other electrical issues that aren't really noticeable right from the get-go, or perhaps it wasn't an accident, but it wasn't reported to Carfax, and it's hard to tell that off an immediate inspection upon arrival if they're going to buy your vehicle, right? So I felt like Vroom was kind of set up for despair a little bit in that regard. So I'm surprised that they lasted as long as they did and succeeded as long as they did, if I'm being honest with you. And honestly, even personally, I've learned that the hard way. If you're ever going to buy a vehicle, you got to go out there. You got to see it in person. You got to drive it. You got to feel it. You got to smell it, because you never know. I mean, you get cigarette smelling it, things that aren't always described or presented in an advertisement, right? So you really have to drive it and feel it. And I experienced that. I learned that the hard way with my 1997 Toyota Land Cruiser that had issues. I bought it sight unseen, had it delivered. Obviously more to that story. Same with my 2014 FJ Cruiser Trail Teams Ultimate Edition. Had like a different color paint on one of the doors. But again, it was a clear Carfax. You would have never guessed it based on the paperwork. But you just got to see it, feel it, drive it. And I know it's a no-brainer, but a lot of people do buy sight unseen. And Vroom was kind of setting themselves up for that. And they did bump into that issue. I know they have. They bought a number of vehicles, and there ended up being a little bit more issue with the vehicles that they purchased. And they found that out after they had resold them outward, right? So they bumped into that headache. But with Amazon selling brand new, obviously less of an issue. But them entering that whole online car buying service scene, I think is a big piece to consider really as we move forward. And I think they will have much more success being able to sell brand new vehicles and not having to worry about, is there something wrong with this used vehicle that I'm selling? So I'll leave it at that. I really just want to pitch that to you, see what your thoughts were. When we see a company like this fail and crumble, what are we doing? We're pushing a lot more vehicles to the auction at this point. All the inventory that Vroom had, they're just pushing it off and selling it through auction at this point, flooding the market even more, forcing values to come down even more, right? So we're going to see those second and third order effects as we move into the next 30, 60 days here. So let me know what your thoughts are. Let me know if you agree that this is a good thing for the used vehicle market, although not a great thing that a company has failed. So let me know what your thoughts are. Appreciate you watching as always. Until next time.